from Tafshin Yud Zay. Amar Cakiba, Ashreichem Yisrael Lefnei Miatam Matarim. Cakiba said, "Fortunate are you, Yidden, that before whom are you becoming purified? Before you, whom is your cleansing and purification? Umi Matareschem, and who is the one that is purifying you?" Which, as we'll soon point out, seems to be really repetitious. It's not really saying anything different. And he brings a raya from the pasuk, that Hashem says to the Yidden, "I will sprinkle upon you pure waters, and you will become pure." In another pasuk where we see that Hashem does the purification of the Yidden, mikveh Yisrael Havaya, that Havaya, Hashem is considered a mikveh for the Yidden. Ma mikveh matayr satmeim, and he goes on that Maim Chazal, just like a mikveh purifies those that are tamei. Baruch Hu matayr Yisrael. That's why Hashem is called the mikveh of the Yidden, because so too Hashem purifies the Yidden, which is fits in with the theme of this week's parsha about the Mabel that came down for 40 days, similar to a mikveh that's 40 saw, because it was there to purify the earth, etc. But we need to understand the double expression that it says before whom you are becoming purified and who is purifying you, because it's seemingly the same thing. You are becoming purified before Hashem, and Hashem is the one that's purifying you. So obviously the fact that Rabbi Akiva chooses to say both, it must mean from this expression, it seems to indicate that there are two aspects of purification. One aspect is the purification before whom you are becoming pure. And then there's another level of purification, hatarim, the purification of who is the one that purifies you. Also, we need to understand the exact expression that he uses over here, that you are fortunate. There are many other expressions about the different schusim that a yid has, etc., the different opportunities and privileges, and so on. Specifically, he uses the word Ashreichem. Why specifically this word? He says in the second paragraph, a close saying, who the general idea behind this is. Just like in a mikveh that purifies those that were impure, there becomes a change in the matter, and it becomes something new. Initially he was impure and he became pure. So too in the fact that Hashem purifies the Eden, there becomes a change in the matter, there becomes something new. So he's going to explain how that is, why that is so. The general idea of purification is tshuva. In tshuva, there are two aspects, two components. One aspect of tshuva is like the world thinks about the concept of tshuva. That tshuva is for a sin. That is one level of tshuva, one aspect of tshuva. And the second aspect, the second component of tshuva is, like it says, that the spirit will return to Hashem that gave it. Which means it's something removed from the idea of sin. It has nothing to do with Averis. It has to do with returning to Hashem, regardless if there is an Aved over there or not. Regardless which level of tshuva we're talking about, whether it's a tshuva for an Aved or it's a tshuva of returning to Hashem, there is a change in the matter and there's something new happening here. Being in the first aspect of tshuva, the common usage of the word tshuva that he's doing, tshuva for a sin, how they move, understood through tshuva becomes a big change. Like the Rambam wrote, the Tmuras, instead of the fact that prior to this, he was unwanted, unaccepted by Hashem. Now through tshuva, he has no connection with sin whatsoever. The ein oimrim loy, because one does not tell them zechoyer ma'asecha harishonim, remember your first actions, your first doings. It's something that is considered a nois dvarim. It's considered not an appropriate thing to tell a Baal Tshuva. You tell him, you remember when you did such and such? Meaning, the reason why you don't tell it to him is because it's not his actions. He's a different person, like the Rambam says. But and even more so, he ascends in his avodah to such a level does he go up higher than the place the Baal Tshuva stand. Complete tzaddikim can't even stand over there. So therefore, this shows on the person being on that through tshuva on aveirus he becomes a totally different person. So too in the second idea of tshuva, that the spirit will return to Hashem that gave it. That has nothing to do with the idea of aveirus. God will comes in this a big change. The way it is from the perspective of above, in other words, the way Hashem gave it. In previous Amarim in that year in Tavshin Yud Zayin, it was explained it's higher than the level in the Eir Insaf Lifnei HaTzimtzum. Just prior to the Tzimtzum, Hashem estimated in his potential everything that would be in afterwards. Then there's a level higher in the Eir Insaf Lifnei HaTzimtzum, which is called Aliyas Haratzon, where it rose up in his will that he wants to create a world. And then there's an even higher level than that. Hamshacha Klolis Shekoidem Aliyas Haratzon, the general drawing down of godliness. That's before the will ascending in his mind to create the world, because there's a transition from Hashem's very essence to that level of that will. It doesn't go Hashem's essence and then the will. There needs to be this general hamshacha beforehand. And then there's Atokas Ha'atzmus, and then there's the way Hashem is removed from these things, but he still relates to it in a way that he's removed from it. But rather, the neshama's root is beyond all of these things that we just now enumerated. It's rooted in Hashem's very essence. Therefore, when a yid through his avodah affects that he should, through his avodah and tshuva, affects in his nefesh, that the spirit should return to Hashem that gave it. So then the yid is going up to the level of the essence of the soul, the way it's rooted in the very essence of Hashem. If so, this is a big change and this is something new. That's the two ideas of purification. Before whom you are becoming purified, and who is purifying you? Before whom you are becoming purified, that's the avodah that's from below to above. On the other hand, the focus is on who does the purification. So it's not focused on you, it's focused on the level above. It's about the drawing down from above to below. That comes down to the person, the essence of the neshama, the way the essence of the neshama is rooted in Hashem's very essence beyond all the levels that he enumerated before the tzimtzum. And to be able to explain these inyanim, so he goes on, nice beis, to be able to understand this. In Amr Azal, the Chazal said, whoever answers Amin Yesh Merava with all of his power and might, they tear up the decree that's against him. Rashi explains, what does it mean with all his power? It doesn't mean that he shouts Amin Yesh Merava at the top of his lungs, but rather Rashi explains b'chol koiche, with all of his might and all of his power, means b'chol kavanose, with his entire intention. In other words, he gives it his full focus, his full intention. That is the meaning The way Rashi explains it, Rashi is explaining the simple pshat in the Gemara. And Nigla, and the inner meaning of it in all of his power, according to Chassidus, it says that Moshe davened to Hashem that the power of Adonai, that has to do with Malchus, I will soon say, should increase. So he's going to connect the Yigdal Nakoyach Adonai with the level of saying Amin Yesh Merabah B'chol Koichai. So he says, Hainu Shapoil Hagdol B'Shem Adonai, a Yid can affect a growth and an increase in the name Adonai. The Shem Adonai Koyal Spheres of Malchus, the general idea of the name Adonai is referring to the sphere of Malchus. When he influences and affects in his avodah, an increase in the growth in spheres of Malchus. Not only does he affect an increase in the level of Malchus Datzilus, Malchus, top of page Zayin, and all the levels of Malchus. Until even the level of the Malchus of the Ein Sof. So then, Azai, when he causes every level of Malchus through his avodah to have this increase, the Koyach Adnai, that's the Amin Yesh Merabah B'chol Koichoi. It's also Shmei, the name, Shmei Rabbah, his great name, Malchus, is Baruch Shem Kvod Mechus L'Envod. The level of name has a lot to do with Spheres of Malchus. She's causing the Koyach of Malchus to increase, especially going through all the levels of Malchus till Malchus the Ein Sof. So then they tear up his decree. What does it mean, tearing up the decree? A decree is only a decree once it's been signed, once it's been sealed. He says, Gam la'achar achitum, even after it being signed and sealed. When his decree was already sealed or came to a final decree, from the perspective of Seder Ishtalshalos, he cannot affect anything, he cannot change anything. When his avodas with all of his might and all of his power, it says of Yadoni, but it's a mistake, that now the power of Adonai increases. He's taking Malchus, even the Malchus of Ein Sof, and he's increasing it, meaning he's drawing down from a level that's even higher than that. So that shows totally beyond Seder Ishtalshalos. So even though because of Seder Ishtalshalos, seemingly the decree, he's stuck in whatever it is, because the Hamshacha that's beyond Seder Ishtalshalos, they tear up his decree. The idea behind this is, the Omer Chazal said, in Krishma, when it says at the end of Shema Hashem Echad, so whoever lengthens in the word Echad, they lengthen his days and years. So again, what's the meaning of lengthening Echad? It doesn't mean in the simple sense that he just says the word Echad and he stretches it out over a minute or whatever it is, but it has a deeper meaning similar to answering Amen Yesh Merabah B'chol Koichai. So it says, it's the lengthening in the meditation and contemplation in the topic that Hashem is one, His name is one. And he thinks into it as this thing will express itself when Mashiach comes. Like it says in the pasuk, on that day when Mashiach comes, Hashem will be one, His name will be one. So the Chazal explained, what does that mean? That this is only when Mashiach comes, meaning that now we don't have that. The Eid not present in the like Mashani Nikrav Ani Nichtav, not the way Nikra Ani Nichtav, not the way I'm read. That's how I'm written. In other words, it's written Yud Kei Vav Kei, but we don't pronounce it as Yud Kei Vav Kei. We read it as Aleph Dal Nun Yud. That means as follows: the fact that in the spiritual concept of this, that we don't read the way it is written, so that the idea of reading is pronunciation, revelation outside. So we don't have the revelation the way the thing really is. what is now at present is that Havaya is one. Aval Shmoi Shu Inyan Hagilui, but his name, which is the idea of revelation, now there is no oneness in his name, meaning in the revelation that comes out from Hashem, we don't see Hashem's oneness in the creation, though it's true. But when Mashiach comes, also his name will be one. There'll be also his unity and oneness, also in his name, which is the idea of revelation. The idea of a name, that's the idea of revelation. Because the name is a combination of letters. It's known that letters, language, words are not for the essence. Just like we say in general about names. Names are not for the person's essence. He only needs a name for outward and outside. The same thing, the idea of letters and language, or the words that I use, is also for outward, as the Mimer will go on to explain at many different stages where we find letters and words within the person and how they're all because of the externality. So he says in line 21, the whole idea of letters is only drawing down and revelation. That's why there's a time to speak and a time to be silent. The very fact that could be a time that a person is silent, that means because it's not part of the essence. Because if it would have been part of the essence and connected with the essence, he wouldn't have been able to be silent. That shows the externality of letters. And just like letters and words is for outside of the person, it's not for the essence. So he says in line 23, so too it's understood concerning the idea of the name, it's only for the sake of drawing down and revelation. And here's going to give a very interesting thing. We know that the name functions even internally. In other words, even a person that is alone and doesn't have anybody that he needs to communicate with still needs a name, because the name is what has to do with the neshama coming down to the body. But it's still the revelation of the neshama to the body, as he's going to explain right now. He says in line 24, neshama achas could be one neshama. When it comes into this body, nikras b'shem echad. He's called by this name. It can be called Chaim when he's in this Gilgul, in this body. When it goes into Gilgul, into another body, it can be called Yankel. Then it can be called by a different name. And if the name was part of the very essence, how can you change the name? From this is a proof that the name is not for the essence. That's man neshama ein lo shem klal. The very essence of the neshama has no name whatsoever. The entire purpose of the name is for drawing down and revealing the neshama into the body, and then afterwards to other people, and so on. It's a very interesting point that Rebbe points out over here, that what's in Medrash called, or what's in Sifrei Kabbalah, what we use the term Oir, which means revelation. When the Medrash, which hints at Kabbalistic ideas without using the Kabbalistic terminology, using terminology that people are more familiar with, so what Kabbalah would refer to as light, which is obviously revelation, the Medrash refers to as a name, because name is like the idea of light in the fact that it's about revelation, it's not the essence. Where do we see this? So there's a famous Medrash that Chassidus always brings down. Before the world was created, there was him and his name alone. What is this name that the Medrash is referring to? According to Chassidus, according to Kabbalah, according to Pnimis HaTorah, it means it was only Hashem and his light. There were no other creations. Another version, this medrash, it was him and his great name alone. Why is it called name? Because the idea of a name is like the idea of light. Just like light is not something that the essence needs, the name is not something that the essence needs. The idea of a name is only for the sake of drawing down and revelation. So going back to the Maimer Chazal that we quoted at the beginning of the Ois, that's what it means. Whoever lengthens in the word echad, meaning it's a lengthening of the mind. Just like Rashi explains, it doesn't mean to shout it at the top of his lungs. It means with his full intention. The same thing what it says to lengthen in the word echad, it means in his intention he has to lengthen. It's a lengthy meditation that also his name is one. This means to say that also on the level of revelation, what's drawn down, it's also one. Even though to us it doesn't seem that way, to us that's only going to be visible when Mashiach comes. But the truth is, this is something that a person's supposed to contemplate and meditate on and realize right now that it's true that way now also. So then he goes on and says, in this revelation, and this what's drawn down that is one, that this itself has in it also multiple levels. Like it will be, like we'll explain later in the Maimer, also in letters and language and words, there's also the letters of speech, there's the letters that you write, there's the letters of thought, and higher. So the same thing in the different revelations of Hashem's name, there's also multiple levels. And despite the fact that he realized that there's multiple levels, whoever lengthens in the word echad, it's the lengthy meditation in all the levels that's in the letters. How in all the levels of letters, all of them it's one. So then they from above lengthen his days and years. It comes down to him from all the levels that's in the levels of letters, in those levels that he meditates and contemplates upon them, meaning all the different levels that he contemplates, he gets from it. He gets from Amal, he gets from Soiv, he gets from Atzilus, he gets from himself. He gets all of these things. And because he's getting all of these high levels, they lengthen his days and his years because he has all of this divine energy that permeates him. So the Maimer is going to continue in the next Ois speaking about there is letters called letters of action. In other words, what you write on a paper. There's letters of speech. Then there's in the person's thought, there's letters. There's like whatever language he thinks in. Then there's higher levels of letters. And every level of these letters is more subtle and more refined, but it's still there wherever there has to be any type of revelation, you have to have that. So the levels of letters of speech is to reveal to someone else. The letters of thought is to reveal ideas and emotions to himself. And then there's the letters in the intellect itself to be able to have the idea even come out at all, etc., as we'll speak about tomorrow.